What are the main differences between the artist journey and studio journey? Well, so the artist journey is the first course that I created. It's kind of my foundational signature course because it was getting at three things. And it's really the underlying inner journey, the underlying psychology, essentially trusting yourself enough so you can go in and really create the art of your dreams, the art that wows and excites you. So it's about the inner journey, and then you move into two big principles, which are composing and hopefully intuitive composing, as well as values, that game changer. So anyway, it's a very foundational course. Anyone who's, I know a number of you have, I have artists who have been first in the artist journey and then move into studio journey. But sometimes people just jump right into studio journey. So studio journey was developed in 2017, and it came out of a conversation I had with a friend in Australia. And it was like, when you go to these workshops, like at live workshops, and you're on fire with painting, you're painting for 5 days and you're so excited and you're got all these paintings, and then you come home and then you might find yourself, maybe you lose some of that energy and you end up on the sofa and it just seems to fall away sometimes, that momentum. So studio journey was kind of the idea of like, well, what if we kept going, So we've got the artist journey. What if we kept going into the studio journey? So there are 12 art bundles, and each one is hitting foundational principles that you can play with in your art. And so we're building. And so we work with what I see as very foundational is right off the get-go, working in a series. Working in a series is so powerful. Why? Because it gets you to go deeper and to continue to experiment and go to the adjacent possible. Okay? Instead of jumping here, jumping there, and jumping here, it's very helpful if you work in a series, even if the series is just 3 paintings. So all of this behind me is a series. In this series, I'm working with reds, which just came out of seemingly nowhere. It came out of a creative impulse a few weeks ago. And I know you all have seen it. So this is the latest one, but this behind it is another one. So basically the creative impulse was, I felt this desire to work with some wide brushes that you get at a hardware store and make some big moves with some reds and pinks, and then just go from there. Okay. And some of these have more breathing space. Some of them have kind of a structure running through. This gets darker. I think you all have seen these. This one was working with very angular movements of a squeegee, and this one I might cut up and break up, not sure yet. This was the very first one. And behind it is this was somewhere in there, quite dark one. So, it's just a series, and who knows? I mean, and some of them, when you do a series, some of them you're really drawn to, some not so much. But the neat thing about a series is you don't get too attached to any particular painting because you're on this roll. You're exploring something, and you're seeing where it goes, and you're not knowing where it's going to go. And it just unfolds into something else, okay? It speaks to you. And so this is a fabulous practice. So studio journey is very much about your studio practice. So that's a piece. Then we move into simplicity and constraint, which is a huge foundational piece. I know you've heard me talk about this. So those two things, those two principles run through everything, okay? And then we get into various things like scale. Do you work large? Do you work small? Because scale is really the first consideration in terms of what am I working on here? Okay. And maybe you change the scale in that series, which I did here. Or maybe keep it the same. And so there's that. And then we move into all kinds of things, rhythms, shapes. We talk about lines some, value, value contrast, color contrast. Ultimately, we get into minimalism and post-minimalism, which is really interesting. We get into combinatorics and recombinatorics, which is a concept from mathematics. We get into a really powerful prompt, which is around a constraint of how would I describe this? It's a contrast and variations and constraint. Okay. So variations on something, variations and constraint. And the constraint is the prompts that are running us through this. So there's a lot of really interesting concepts in there. And it's just to give you some juice, something to work with. And so I think that would be a powerful thing to consider. So it's 12 art bundles. It's quite a lot. And then there's extra things. So it ends up being like 14 or 15 essentially. Versus with the Artist's Journey, it's honed down to essentially a few things that make 90% of the difference.